I wanted to do this video for ages because I find that when you're in a reading slump and you've gone without reading for a while, you need something easy as sort of a stepping stone to get yourself back into where you were. And I do think there are levels of reading, like say for when you were in primary school and there was different types of books depending on what year you were in. I think the same follows through into your adulthood as well. If you haven't read for a while, you might have fallen down sort of a level in reading. Reading is not like something that comes natural to humans. It's a muscle that you have to exercise in your brain. So I hate the whole like, you don't need to read things because other people are reading them, and you don't need to read things because they're a classic or whatever. Just read things that you enjoy first of all, and then you can move on to sort of like the harder stuff if you want to. I was even prejudiced sometimes beforehand to reading things like chick lit. Books, say by Colleen Hoover, get a lot of stick online, especially on TikTok, like people slagging each other for reading Colleen Hoover because it is a chick lit book. But it's like the same thing with pop music. If you enjoy pop music, don't let anyone tear you down or think that it's embarrassing that you're listening to it or reading chick lit, because if you enjoy it, that's all that matters. There's a good mix here of like very easy. There's a few ones that are over 200 pages, but I tried to keep it under. But what they all have in common is really invigorating, gripping story, evocative, easy to read in the sense that there's not too much inaccessible language. You don't really have to stop to Google. And when you do first start getting back into reading, you've read a page and you don't really know what has happened, and you need to keep rereading over and over again to absorb what you're reading. These are kind of good books to keep you on top of that, because you're so absorbed in the story, it's kind of hard to forget what you've just read. Hopefully that you find this helpful to get you back into reading. I will do another video. I have an idea for my favourite Irish authors books and my favorite books overall as well, which is all changing all the time, obviously, because I'm reading all the time. But as a new mom, it has become a bit harder to keep on track of how much I was reading beforehand. I regret all the time I didn't spend reading before I had her. Do you know, it's like one of the things that I wish I did more before I had her, because it's probably the only thing I'm finding it hard to find the time for, because a baby takes up two of your hands and all your mental power. So Claire Keegan, Small Things Like These. She is also the author of Foster, which is the book based off the movie on Colleen Kuhn, if you've seen that. Irish female author, which I always try to strive to read. I love this without giving too much away. It's kind of a book that you read for how it's written rather than the storyline. It's based in an economic depression, or on the verge of an economic depression in the 80s in Ireland, at the same time as Magdalene Laundries. It's about an illegitimate son and his upbringing and his adulthood now, and he's like reflecting back on the past and his upbringing. They're just really nice depictions of a small Irish town and how they speak to each other, and kind of like small town mentality, as well as the influence of the Catholic Church and that had on everyone's lives back in the day. So this is a really good book if you're Irish, because you can kind of relate to a lot of things that are going on. But I have read reviews online of like people who aren't Irish enjoying this book as well, so you don't need to be Irish to enjoy it. But yeah, I loved it. I give it a 4.5 stars, and it's only 110 pages. So like, I read this in a morning when Jason had the baby, so I was able to just read it in one go. There's like a sense of achievement, and it motivates you, I think, to read more when you're able to finish a book in one sitting, because you're like, oh, I find it a bit overwhelming, the amount of books that I wanted to read in a short period of time, especially at the beginning of the year. You like set yourself an intention or a goal for how many books that you want to read, and then you can get overwhelmed with not going at the pace that you want to, or you're not getting things finished as fast as you want to. If you start out with the easier, shorter reads, I think it does motivate you to continue on, and reiterates how much you actually enjoy reading for the act of reading, rather than just getting them done and over with, if that makes sense. Convenience Store Woman, a story of a woman working in a convenience store, obviously, but it has really good parallels in, I think it's from the perspective of someone who's neurodivergent. It has good parallels for people who might feel behind in life or compared to your peers. Yeah, it just touches on the pressures that familial and friend relationships put on you, and kind of how you compare yourself a lot to how other people's lives are going, even though you don't really know what goes on behind closed doors. It does feel monotonous at times, but I think it's to mimic the monotony of working in a shop, and how we can be so indulged in our lives and work that every day feels the same. This was 4 stars. Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I think it's Kawaguchi. I love Japanese names. They're like really nice to say. And I was reading this out loud. I read this out loud to my baby, and I just found it was really fun to say the Japanese names. But I love the story. Now, it is fantastical. I'm not really into fantasy or like those sort of stories. I'm more like descriptions of nature and character development rather than reading for the plot, even though there are some books here that you would just be reading for the plot, and that's what I think makes books easy to read, if that makes sense, because you're like wanting to find out what happens next. So that's why I found this really easy to read. It's just about over 200 pages, so it's not too long, but I read this out loud to my baby to make it a bit easier. There's nothing dirty in it, there's no dirty scenes, because I just feel it just feels weird when you're reading out sex scenes to your baby or curse words, just even if she can't understand, but it still feels a bit odd. So yeah, I do recommend this if you were thinking of, if you want to get back into reading. Also, I love the cover, it's so pretty. It's kind of like a collection of short stories. You want to find out what happens to each character in the book, and it's really emotional and evocative, feels kind of nostalgic. I was reminiscing on past relationships, because you know the way everyone ruminates on like, if we could go back in time, what would we change? Whereas in this book, you can't change anything, so it just, you kind of learn to accept things in a way where it has a moral of the story, and the overarching moral of the story is that we need to accept our lives for how they are, and everything happens for a reason. So there's a nice feeling, like a warm fuzzy feeling at the end of reading this book as well, because you're kind of like, oh, I actually do like my life the way it has turned out, even if I do want, if I regret things and I want to go back in time. I give this 4 stars as well. 4 stars. My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I'm obsessed with this cover. I know when I read this originally, it had the OG pink cover, but I haven't seen this one, and I got this off World of Books secondhand. This is definitely a 5 star for me. I just found it really funny. I loved the character, the protagonist of it, and how she's just like I love a book that has an unlikable protagonist. Just the description of depression and coming out the other end of it, and just the feeling, I think everyone has that feeling of just wanting to sleep for ages. I don't want to give too much away, but loved this book for character development. A rich woman who's going through it mentally, her internal monologue throughout it all. It's just really fun. It's funny, gripping story. I gave this 5 stars. Boys Don't Cry, another female Irish author by Fiona Scarlett. I think this is one of my favourite books of all time. Definitely top 3. The Hearts of Invisible Furies is still number 1. I think The Secret History is up there. I love anything by Rachel Cusk as well. I've talked about it before, but it's from the perspective of a child, so there's that like naive undertones of it, experiencing the world from the first time. Tears at your heartstrings. It's so good. Very fast paced as well. Mia and Jason both read this in one sitting. My mom said that she couldn't read this because it was too sad. So just a trigger warning, if anyone doesn't like too sad of a book, sobbed at this. 5 stars. Now this is a big book. This is long, but I also was able to read it in one sitting because it is very fast paced, easy to read, accessible language, and you're reading it for the plot line. This would be under the umbrella term of chick lit, I suppose. It's like a rom-com, but in a book form. I really thought this was such a gripping story with like a audible gasp plot twist at the end. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, I would really recommend reading this. Other people recommended Daisy Jones and the Six. This is the same author, but I haven't read that yet. But I know it's getting turned into a movie, so I might want to read it before the movie comes out. I think this is getting turned into a movie as well, but I loved this story. LGBT, bit of LGBT in it. I love books that are just about the plot. You know, the reason you read it for the plot is, it's hard for me to describe without giving it away, but there's a lot of twists and turns. 5 stars. Last book, and this would have been one of my favorites from when I was a teenager. I read it probably when I was 15, now maybe a bit older. 17. Read in one sitting. I loved it so much. A huge plot twist at the end. You're really reading it for the plot. Again, I don't want to give too much away, so I don't really know. And it's been ages since I read it, so I can't really remember, but I do remember loving it so much. It's still 5 stars. And I know what the plot twist is, and I remember being like, and I think I was crying as well. It touches on friendship, heartbreak, grief. 5 stars. The reason why I bought some of the books, when I read things, I lend it to someone or donate it, because if you move around a lot, it's just hard hoarding onto stuff, especially books because they're so heavy. But I bought some of these secondhand from World of Books if anyone's conscious of like not contributing to waste. But I was going to do a giveaway of all the books that I mentioned in this video. So if you go to my Instagram, I'll have the rules there on the post. All you have to do is... let me think. Be following me on Instagram, liked the post, and share it on your story. I think that's it. And tag me in the story. Now, I think there's a feature on Instagram where I can see if you shared it on your story. I'll be able to see it, but maybe just in case, tag me. You can hide the tag, like you don't need to, you know, have the big "Keep on!" You know, sometimes it's embarrassing when you're entering giveaways, but I'll make the picture aesthetic so people won't know. Yeah, I just wanted to give away these books if anyone hasn't read them, and if you have read some of them, you can give one to your friend or your sister or brother or whatever. So these are all the books I'm giving away. Thanks so much for watching. I just started the Rachel Cusk trilogy. I'll let you know how I get on. I'm obsessed with Rachel Cusk. I'm sorry if there's any corners turned in any of these books when I give them away. Obviously they're all secondhand, so they won't be as good quality as you buy it brand new, but they're still obviously readable and they still smell like, you know, book. They have nice book smell. So, and also if you have any more suggestions for short and easy reads to get you back into reading, leave them in the comments. No,